God is grieved. God was grieved. What does it mean to be grieved? He was hurt. Is there anybody here you've ever been hurt before by something that has happened and it really grips your heart? God, not man here, but we're talking about God, the one who created all things, the one who looked at nothing and created something. He said, let there be. Now, he's the one, early on in Genesis, in the book of beginnings, he is grieved in his heart. He's upset. Notice why he's upset. If you look at verse 6, it says it grieved him in his heart, but it says, verse 5, it says that God saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that is that in your Bible? Every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. Notice how the thought life, it got so corrupt. And you do know, the Bible says, as a man thinketh, so is he. If you begin to think something long enough and entertain it long enough, you begin to carry it out. And that can be good or bad. And in this case, there was some bad things going on, corrupt thoughts, evil thoughts going on inside the minds of men. And eventually, it got to the point where it escalated and manifested itself. And if you were to keep reading, and let's look at another verse here. If you go to just to pull this out, verse 12. And God, verse 11, the earth also was corrupt before God, and the earth was filled with violence. Filled with violence. So that means that even back then, the level of confusion, the level of sin got to the level where people would just do anything they want to do to kill somebody else. Are y'all with me this morning or this afternoon at this point? It's violence that seems to be creeping up. It crept up here in the text early on in Genesis. If you were to read something else, verse 12, it says, and God looked upon the earth, and behold, it was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted his way upon the earth. You know, that's bad. Even if you look at verse 13, God said unto Noah, the end of all flesh is come before me, for the earth is filled with violence through them. Violence has crept up into the earth, so much so that it's grieving God. So the first thing we just want to look at is that God was grieved. But there is good news, folks. In the midst of the grieving of God, we find something happening. In verse 8, it says, but Noah found what? He found favor or grace in the eyes of the Lord. So God was grieved, but God has a way of giving favor. Can somebody say favor? God knows how to give favor. It's interesting that God found this man, Noah, out of all of the evil that was going on, out of all of the corruption that was going on, all the violence that took place in the world, God somehow, he searched all over and he found one man who was a father. He found him in the midst of all of the violence that was going on in the culture. He found at least one man. You know, God always has one man, one person. He'll have someone. If you look throughout the Bible, I don't care what was going on that was silly or crazy, God always had somebody in his back pocket. And here he finds a man named Noah. You remember Noah. Now, we're not going through the whole thing with Noah, but how many of you remember Noah built the ark? That's the man. He found favor with God. Noah, what is it about Noah? Noah is someone who is faithful. If you look at verse 9, it says, these are the generations of Noah. Noah was a just man and perfect in his generations, and Noah walked with God. If you want to find somebody that's awesome, look at them walking with God. He's a father. As a matter of fact, we read it. We'll read it again just in case you missed it. Noah was a just man and perfect in his generations, and Noah walked with God. And Noah begat how many sons? 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. He's a father. Tell somebody he's a father. He's a faithful father. He is a loving father. He is an obedient father. And you say, why is that? Because if you know the story of this man, what he does is He obeys God when everyone else is laughing at him. He builds an ark, and it had not rained. So people were trying, well, what are you doing? I can just imagine everything that he had to hear and had to deal with. He's trying to do the right thing because he heard God speak to him. But yet, in that violent culture at that time, he still maintained the course. I wonder if we have some Noahs living here today. Some fathers who will remain faithful to God and to stand up for righteousness and to represent God and to be those who are set aside to walk with God, because God does honor you. God will grant you favor. And so here we have Noah, a man who received the favor of God in the midst of all of the violence. Noah was a father who was found faithful. And he stood before God. He walked before God. God loved him. He could look all over. Can you imagine the heart of God at this time? His own creation, killing each other, creating all sorts of crazy sin with each other. And now he looks and he searches and he finds Noah. And so Noah had the favor of God. So the first thing we said was what? God was what? Grieved. Secondly, God gave what? Favor. And then third and lastly, if you look at verses 13 and 14. And God said unto Noah, the end of all flesh is come before me, for the earth is filled with violence through them. And behold, I will destroy them with the earth. Make thee an ark of gopher wood. Rooms shalt thou make in the ark, and shalt pitch it within and without with the pitch. So not only was God grieved, not only did God give favor, but also God gave safety. You know, I love God because he always has a plan. He always knows how to get us out of a circumstance. When our back is up against the wall, is there anybody here, your back has been up against the wall at some point in life? Don't play games now. If you know that your back has been up against the wall and God somehow brought you out, and yet here God raises up a man in Noah to build an ark that would provide safety, because it was going to rain. God was going to destroy all life. He says, you know what? I'm going to destroy man. But Noah found grace, and his family, his wife, his sons, the in-laws, they were able to get into the ark along with the animals. They got in. God always has a plan. His plan was, well, let me just say this. There was going to be, according to God, destruction through the flood. But Noah will be the one to provide the construction. So there's going to be destruction. At the same time, there's going to be construction. So you have Noah who's building, and he's building this ark while the people are going crazy. They are violent. They're acting out anything that's crazy in their heart, in their minds that they imagine. And yet God found one man, one father, in the midst of a violent culture. And this man was faithful to God. And he provided the ark, an ark where his family could get in. An ark of safety, an ark of salvation. It's a floating box, if you will. This is described by some scholars. It floated, and it rained for how many days? 40 days. And it rained for 40 nights. It kept on raining. But you know who was safe? The people that were in the ark. So, as I look at this, and what God is saying to us today, Messiah, there is a question here. Are we looking for God to provide that ark of safety for us? And especially our fathers, dads, we want to be the ones that walk with God so that we can provide the safety for our families. And so in our communities, we want to represent God in such a way that they can find safety in God, and they see God through us and how we conduct ourselves. Are y'all with me? I love God because he always has a plan. He always knows how to get you out of a situation. And the ark is, you got to understand, the ark is one that bridges us. It takes us through death into life. And what he did was God, he so loved us that he stepped out of heaven himself to come down in the middle of a mess, a violent culture. He came down through Jesus Christ to feel the pain, take on sin himself, and then give his life for us and be raised with all power in his hand. Are y'all with me so far? So, where does that leave us now? I am, and I'm sure all of us, if you haven't been paying attention to the news, we are in a situation where we're dealing with killing, we're dealing with violence, we're dealing with a situation in Charleston at the Emmanuel AME, or African Methodist Episcopal Church. 9 people were killed while they're praying, while they're having worship. The pastor, Pastor Clementa Pinckney, shot by the young man, 21 years of age, Dylan Roof. And I know that there's so many things, so many people are questioning different things, and many commentators, they're coming in with different angles on it. But one thing is true. Number one, this young man, he came in and he killed, it happens to be black people. Are y'all with me? At this church, a very historic church, a place where the Underground Railroad was. Historic church. During a time of worship, and if you look at our history, the church is a place where once people start attacking it, because you remember the women the young ladies or the kids who were bombed in the church. If I'm correct, I heard Dr. King's son say something recently, and when he said it, I said, that's right. His own mother was killed, shot in the church while she's playing the piano. In the church house, the place of faith. This is supposed to be the place of safety in worship. And so, brothers and sisters, I am charged today in sharing this with all of us because it is a time that we stop playing church. Violence is creeping up. We can't get around it. It's in the churches, it's in our homes, it's in our neighborhoods. We have to stop playing church. It's not just for Messiah, it's for every church that professes Jesus Christ. We have to stop bickering ourselves. We have to come together and walk together, work together, because violence is escalating. It's getting higher. It reminds me almost like in Genesis. Wicked thoughts. You're thinking of doing the right thing. Here they were in this church, Bible study, Wednesday night. That's what we were doing right here. We had Bible study. Somebody could have walked in here, did the same thing. For our children, our youth, please hold on to what you're seeing and what you're hearing. It should be an incentive for you to not only seek God more, but also to work harder in school, to do your best wherever. It should help us also to guard who we hang with, how we conduct ourselves. And then also as adults, we want to make sure that we're responsible, we're accountable to God and to each other. We should represent Christ wherever we go. There is something going on. And I pray that we are waking up to see what is happening. Now, for those of you who are sitting there saying, well, everybody's a racist. No, everybody is not a racist. Everyone is not a racist. But there are some people who are racist. And those that are, the enemy is using them to bring harm, violence to people where it should not happen. God is not pleased. God is a God of love. He's a God of justice. He's a God of mercy and grace. And today's message is in particular for fathers, and I told you we'll come back to fathers another Sunday with more emphasis. But for the fathers that are here in particular, I pray that we hear this word to stand up like Noah. Be righteous in right standing with God in an unrighteous environment. There's a lot of violence, but still stand up, represent God. We want to represent our homes well. We want to do well wherever God places us so that he is pleased, he is glorified, protecting our families, looking out for others in the neighborhood who are less fortunate than ourselves. And I believe God will be glorified in that.